They laughed at you, didn't they? They smirked when you walked in the room, whispered behind closed doors, gave you those looks, the kind that say everything without saying a word. You felt it, the sting of it, like 1,000 needles sliding under your skin, subtle but sharp. They didn't have to raise their voices, didn't have to say your name. You knew. You could feel it in the pit of your stomach, that twisted, sour feeling like you were nothing more than a passing joke in someone else's comedy. You weren't just overlooked. You were disrespected, dismissed. They made you feel like an afterthought, like you didn't belong. And worse, they made you believe it. They didn't see you. Not really. They saw what they wanted to see. The shy one, the awkward one, the failure, the outsider, the one who was always almost enough, but never quite made the cut. You spoke, but no one listened. You tried, but they didn't care. You showed up, and it was like you were never even there. And the cruelest part, you started to fade in your own eyes. You started to shrink, to bend, to mold yourself into something that might finally get a little attention. You lowered your voice, swallowed your opinions, hid your fire just to be accepted. And even then, they didn't respect you. Even then, they kept laughing. You remember the moments, don't you? Those dark, bitter seconds that seemed to stretch into eternity. The job you didn't get. The friend who disappeared. The lover who turned cold. The door that slammed in your face without warning. You remember walking home with your fists clenched, biting your lip to keep from crying. You remember staring up at the ceiling late at night, wondering what the hell was wrong with you, wondering why you weren't good enough, why everyone else seemed to shine while you were drowning in shadows. You told yourself, be patient. You whispered, your time will come. But every day that passed without recognition chipped away at your hope like rust corroding iron. It's easy to pretend it doesn't hurt, isn't it? Easy to wear that mask. The I don't care mask. The fake smile. The hollow laugh. You got real good at pretending you were fine. But deep down, you were screaming. Deep down, there was a storm no one saw. A war behind your eyes. And it wasn't just their disrespect that cut you. It was the betrayal of people you trusted, people who should have stood by you, who should have fought for you, who should have believed in you. Instead, they turned their backs, they walked away. And when they did, they took a piece of you with them. You ever notice how they only respect you when someone else does first? How they only show love after the world decides you're worthy of it. You weren't worth their time until someone else said you were, until someone else gave you a platform. Then suddenly, they came crawling back, smiling, pretending, clapping for a version of you they never supported. But where were they when you were broken? Where were they when you needed a hand, a word, a damn ounce of belief? Nowhere. And the truth is, that silence hurt more than the insults. That empty space where loyalty should have lived, it echoed. And that's the thing. It wasn't just that they laughed. It was that they didn't see you. Really see you. You were invisible, a ghost walking among the living, screaming but no one heard, fighting but no one noticed. That kind of invisibility, it doesn't just bruise. It scars, it carves deep, it changes you, turns warmth into ice, turns light into shadow, turns a dreamer into a monster they never saw coming. Because when the world refuses to give you respect, you stop asking, you stop begging, you stop hoping, and you start building, you start plotting, you start becoming something they can no longer ignore. You didn't want revenge. Not at first. You just wanted peace. A little dignity. A place at the table. But when they slammed that door in your face over and over again, Something snapped, something woke up, something primal. You realized you'd never be given respect. You'd have to take it. You'd have to become so powerful, so undeniable, that their silence turns to fear, that their whispers turn to stutters, that every insult becomes a regret they wear like chains. You'd have to become the storm they never saw brewing. You remember every laugh, every eye roll, every time they ignored your name. You remember it because it was fuel. And now, deep in your chest, where the hurt used to live, there's fire, there's rage, controlled, focused. It's not wild anymore. It's precise. You don't just want respect. You want them to feel the weight of what they overlooked. You want them to know they fed the very thing that now towers over them. The thing that grew in silence. The thing they tried to crush. You. So let them laugh. Let them pretend. Let them sleep on you. Because one day soon, they'll wake up, and they won't be able to laugh anymore. They'll hear your name and feel something twist in their gut. Not guilt, fear. Because you're not invisible anymore. You're not begging. You're not broken. You're rising. And when you rise, it won't be with a whisper. It'll be with thunder. And they'll remember every time they disrespected you. Every time they chose someone else. Every time they overlooked the very force that now stands above them. And that memory will haunt them, because the one they dismissed is the one they now fear. The silence was loud, wasn't it? It wrapped around you like a cold, wet shroud, heavy and suffocating. You sat in rooms full of people, yet felt alone. You screamed without sound, hoping someone, anyone, would hear you. But no one did. No one came. That's what broke you. Not the pain, not the loss, not even the disrespect. It was the abandonment. The world moved on, and you were left to rot in stillness, forgotten, left behind like you were never even real, like you never mattered. You remember that silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was a silence that mocked you, the kind that crept in through the cracks and whispered lies in your ear. You're alone. You're nothing. No one's coming. It spoke louder than words ever could. You'd stare at your phone, hoping for a call that never came. Look out the window, waiting for someone to just notice you were drowning. But no one did. Family, too busy. Friends, gone. Society, didn't even blink. And you sat there, watching the world rush by as if your pain was invisible, as if your suffering was just background noise. That's the darkness they don't talk about, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just seeps in, slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up, and it's inside you. It's in your breath, in your thoughts, in the way your hands shake when no one's watching. You laugh less, you speak less, you feel less. And what's left? A hollow echo of who you used to be. But here's what they never understood. That silence became your sanctuary. That darkness, your crucible. The world's rejection became your isolation chamber. And in that chamber, something was born. Not weakness, not surrender. Something different, something dangerous, something the world wasn't ready for. Because while they moved on, you were forced to sit with your demons, to wrestle with them, to bleed with them, to either let them consume you or learn to master them. You started asking yourself questions, ugly ones. Why me? What did I do wrong? Am I broken? But after enough nights of asking and getting no answer, something changed. The questions stopped being cries for help and became sparks, flickers of rage, not blind rage. No, this wasn't wild emotion. This was focused, intentional, a quiet fury forming deep beneath your ribs, a storm gathering in the pit of your being, because you realized no one was coming to save you. And that meant you'd have to save yourself. That meant if you were going to climb out of that hole, it would be on bloodied hands and torn knees. And once you did, no one could ever take that from you. You remember lying on the floor, don't you? Back when getting up felt impossible. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Like gravity had its own personal vendetta against your body. Like your soul had been shackled to failure, to abandonment, to betrayal. And no matter how much you wanted to scream, there was no voice left. Only breath, only trembling, only that void where hope used to be. You kept it all inside. Because when you opened up, they rolled their eyes, told you to be strong, to get over it, to stop being dramatic. They didn't understand that the silence wasn't just outside, it was inside too. A hollow vacuum in your chest that sucked every shred of belief from your bones. And in that place, vengeance began to whisper. Not against others at first, but against the old version of you. The version that waited, the version that begged, the version that broke. That old you had to die in the silence. There was no other way. You had to bury the weak voice, bury the desperate thoughts, bury the longing for someone to notice. You buried it all, alone. With shaking hands and teary eyes, you dug a grave for the you who still believed in fairy tales. And when it was done, when the dirt covered that version of you, you stood over the grave and felt something rise. It wasn't joy, it wasn't relief, it was purpose. Purpose born in pain, focus born in rejection, fire born in abandonment. You see, isolation is where legends are born, not in the crowd, not in the applause, in the shadows, in the silence. When no one is watching, and everything inside you is crumbling, that's where strength is forged. You didn't have someone to pull you up. You became your own damn rope. You didn't have comfort. You became the cold. You adapted. You evolved. You survived what should have killed you. And that makes you something the world doesn't know how to handle. They think silence breaks people. But not you. Not anymore. Now you wear that silence like armor. Now you sit in the quiet and smile. Because you know what it gave you. You know what it taught you. That the absence of others revealed the presence of your own power. That the lack of support forced you to find an unshakable foundation within. You were buried in that silence, yes, but like a seed. And now you're growing into something they never saw coming. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't need their calls, their fake smiles, their shallow words. You've outgrown it all. Because silence was your crucible. Loneliness was your training ground. And you emerged with something no one can steal. Self-respect. Resilience. Rage sharpened into discipline. Let them stay loud. Let them post and pose and pretend. You've mastered the dark. You've made peace with the cold. You don't fear silence anymore. You own it. You stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Not the eyes. Those were dull now, clouded by too many nights with no sleep and too many days pretending to be fine. Not the face. It wore the weight of 1,000 silent battles. Not the posture. It sagged under the gravity of carrying pain no one else could see. What looked back at you wasn't a person. It was a question, a ghost in the glass. A reflection of someone who used to dream, used to hope, used to believe. But now you didn't know who you were anymore. You touched your own face like a stranger, traced the lines, the scars, the subtle changes, and deep inside, something whispered. What happened to you? You used to laugh with fire. You used to walk like you owned the ground. But somewhere along the way, the world chipped pieces off of you. A little here, a little there. Every rejection took something. Every insult, every betrayal, every silent dismissal. They all stole something, until one day you weren't whole anymore. You were fragments, shards, a cracked mirror reflecting a version of you that didn't feel real. And those voices, oh, those damn voices. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. You're too much. You're not enough. They lived in your head rent-free, echoes of people who didn't matter, but whose words stuck like poison. And the worst part? You started to believe them. That's what kills most people. Not the fall, not the pain, but the voice that says, "This is who you are now. Stay down." You started carrying their voices like your own. You let them build walls inside your mind, closing you off from the truth of your power. And slowly, piece by piece, they made you forget who you were. You looked in that mirror and saw weakness. You saw failure. You saw shame. But none of it belonged to you. Not really. It was handed to you, thrown at you, branded into your identity by people who never bothered to learn your name, never stayed long enough to hear your story. And because they said it enough, because you heard it loud and often, you mistook it for truth. You let their lies become your language. And that is how they win. Not by destroying you, but by convincing you to destroy yourself. And that's the moment where most people give up. Right there, at the edge of the mirror. They see the distance between who they are and who they used to be, and it feels too far, too wide, too broken. So they stop. They stop trying. They sink into the lie. They wear the mask. They settle. They build a life out of fear and decorate it with fake smiles. But you didn't stop. You stood there longer. You stared harder. You looked deeper. And somewhere beneath the broken reflection, beneath the pain, the shame, the fatigue, you saw something move. A flicker of who you used to be, who you still are. You had every reason to give up, every reason to believe the lie, to fold, to break, to surrender. But something inside you refused. Even when everything else fell silent, that one ember kept glowing, barely, dimly. But it was there, and you knew. If you could keep that flame alive, even for just one more day, there was still a chance. You whispered to yourself, didn't you? Late at night, barely able to speak. I'm still here. Not strong, not proud, but present. Still standing, still breathing. And that meant something. That had to mean something. That's when you realized the mirror was never meant to show you your worth. It only shows what's on the surface. And the surface, it lies. It shows the bags under your eyes, but not the miles you've walked. It shows the scars, but not the wars you've survived. It shows the tears, but not the strength it took to cry. That mirror isn't broken, it's just incomplete. It doesn't show the fire that kept you alive when everything else died. It doesn't show the nights you didn't quit. It doesn't show the grit, the will, the quiet rage that refused to bow. You see those things, you carry them, you are them. So now every time you look in the mirror, you don't search for validation. You don't beg the reflection to tell you who you are. Because now you know. You remember. You've stitched yourself back together from scraps. You've rebuilt your soul with pieces they tried to shatter. You've looked at the worst parts of yourself and didn't flinch. And that makes you dangerous. Because someone who has been to hell and climbed back isn't scared of breaking. Someone who's had their identity stolen and forged a new one from fire isn't afraid of judgment. And someone who's faced the mirror and found purpose in the pain is someone they can no longer control. You no longer fear what you see in the mirror. You own it because the reflection staring back now. That's not a ghost, that's a warrior. They laughed while you bled. They rose while you crawled, stumbling through every storm they never had to face. You watched them thrive, flashing smiles, winning accolades, toasting to success, while you sat in silence, stitching your soul back together with trembling hands. And the hardest part, they weren't just indifferent, they enjoyed it. Your pain became their entertainment, your struggle, their favorite story to tell behind your back. They pointed fingers in rooms you weren't invited into, whispered with smirks. You could feel their eyes on you before you even turned the corner, full of pity, masked as concern. But you saw through it. You always saw through it. They didn't want you to rise. They wanted you to stay broken. You made them feel better about their mediocre victories just by existing beneath them. You became the punchline. Still trying. Still stuck in the same place. Poor thing. Just doesn't get it. They chuckled, sipped their drinks, posted their filtered lives, and fed on your failure like vultures circling a dying animal. They needed your weakness to feel strong. They needed your silence to boost their volume. They needed you to stay small because your potential scared the hell out of them. And so they mocked what they couldn't understand. They ridiculed what they couldn't kill. They pretended to be above you, but inside, they knew the truth. You were dangerous, even when broken, because even at your lowest, you had something they didn't. Depth. They floated on shallow waters while you sank into oceans of truth. They skimmed the surface. You faced the abyss. And when you climbed out, gasping, shaking, wounded, they laughed. Not because you were weak, but because they were afraid of what you might become if you ever truly healed. But God, it hurt. It hurt to be the underdog, to fight battles in silence while everyone else moved forward unscathed, to fake smiles while your world burned inside, to be overlooked, underestimated, mocked. You'd walk into a room and feel smaller, shrink yourself just to fit their comfort, make yourself quiet so their egos wouldn't feel threatened, all the while screaming internally, "I'm more than what you see." But they didn't care. They didn't want to see you win. You were useful as a failure. You were familiar as a mess. And if you started rising, if you dared to believe in yourself again, that would shatter the fragile little stories they told themselves about superiority. So they kept mocking, kept whispering, kept doubting. They didn't just ignore your pain. They enjoyed it, and still, you endured. You sat through their ridicule. You heard every joke, every snide remark. You smiled when it burned. You stayed quiet when it thundered in your chest, because deep down, you were collecting it all. Every word, every look, every fake handshake. You were storing it like fuel, letting it marinate, letting it build, not as hate, not as revenge, but as reminders of who they are and who you're becoming. They thought they were burying you with shame, but they were planting you in rage, a sacred, focused rage. The kind of rage that doesn't lash out, it rises up. The kind that doesn't scream, it transforms. You watched them mock you and took notes. You watched them thrive and took inventory. And you knew, one day, the tables would turn. And when they did, you wouldn't need to say a word. Your presence would be the thunderclap. Your rise would be the response. They don't know what it costs to be the underdog, the emotional toll, the way your self-worth erodes when everyone treats you like you're a footnote in their success story. They don't understand the battle it takes just to believe in yourself after so much dismissal. They don't know how much strength it takes to keep showing up when everything inside says quit. but you do. You lived it. And that's why you'll never be like them. That's why, when the tables turn, and they will, you won't become what they were. You'll rise with grace, with power, with scars that tell the truth. Because you never needed to mock anyone to feel strong. You never needed to tear anyone down to stand tall. You just needed time, space, silence. And while they were laughing, you were building. While they were pointing, you were preparing. While they were feeding off your failure, you were forging something unbreakable. You weren't losing, you were loading. And when the day comes that you walk into the same rooms they once whispered in, when the air shifts and the same people who mocked you go quiet, you won't need revenge. Because your presence will say everything. You walked through the graveyard of your soul like a ghost. No sound, no color, just the cold breath of what could have been. Dreams buried in shallow graves, hopes marked with unspoken eulogies. You didn't have to read the names. You remembered every one of them, each headstone etched with a version of yourself that didn't make it. There lies the dream you had when you were a child, the one that made your eyes light up and your heart race. Gone. Next to it, the passion you abandoned when life told you it was unrealistic. Buried. Over there, the self-worth you surrendered when the world convinced you that you weren't good enough. Forgotten. You wandered those paths not as a mourner, but as a prisoner. Locked in your own past, surrounded by ghosts that wore your face and whispered with your voice. You could have been more. Some nights, it felt like the graveyard grew. Like every disappointment planted a new cross. Every heartbreak dug another pit. Every betrayal carved a fresh name in cold stone. And the worst part? You started thinking maybe this was it. Maybe this was all there would ever be. A slow march between tombstones, carrying regret like a second skin. You sat by the graves, for hours, for days, for years. Maybe not physically, but mentally. You were there, trapped in that haunted field where everything you ever loved had died. Your energy, buried. Your motivation, dead on arrival. Your light, faded into shadow and depression. It wasn't some loud, dramatic storm. It was quiet. It was the fog that settled in and made everything heavy. You didn't cry. You didn't scream. You just stopped. You stopped dreaming, stopped hoping, stopped believing. It was like life became grayscale. Nothing tasted, nothing touched, nothing mattered. Hopelessness isn't loud. It's hollow. It's the ache in your chest that won't go away. It's waking up and already wishing the day would end. It's looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger and not even caring anymore. And right when you thought it couldn't get worse, fury came knocking, not the kind you show, the kind that lives under your skin, the kind that clenches your jaw and burns your throat, the kind that asks, "Why me?" over and over until your soul is raw. You weren't just angry at the world, you were angry at yourself, for failing, for trusting, for not being stronger. You cursed your own name under your breath, blamed your reflection for being too soft, too slow, too broken. And that kind of rage, that's the most dangerous kind, because it's aimed inward, and if left unchecked, it doesn't just kill dreams, it kills you. But even there, in that place, something refused to die. That ember, that cursed ember. It mocked the silence, refused to go out. It didn't roar, it didn't scream, it just burned. Quietly, stubbornly, like a heartbeat in the dark. Something still burned. You don't even know why. You had every reason to let it die. Every reason to say, "Enough, I'm done." But some part of you, buried beneath the grief and the rage and the numbness, held on. Maybe it was a whisper from who you used to be. Maybe it was a glimpse of who you still could become. Or maybe it was just instinct. The raw, animal instinct to survive, to rise. Because that ember was never for show. It wasn't for the world. It wasn't for applause. It was for you. A reminder that no matter how many times they buried you, you were still alive, still breathing, still dangerous. They didn't put out your fire. They just made you learn how to carry it in silence. And now, when you walk through that inner graveyard, you no longer see it as a place of death. It's sacred ground, holy. A battlefield where the weak parts of you were laid to rest, so something stronger could be born. You walk those paths not in mourning, but in honor. You whisper to your fallen dreams, "Thank you for teaching me." Because the ones that died, they made space for what's coming. And the ember? It's not just a spark anymore. It's catching now. It's growing. Because you're done sitting by graves. You're done crying over ghosts. You're done being a eulogy in your own story. You're not dead. You're becoming. It didn't come with a trumpet, no flash of lightning, no grand applause. Just a whisper, barely there, like the wind exhaling through a cracked window. But it spoke with the force of destiny. After all the silence, after all the nights you begged for a sign, for something, anything, to make it stop hurting. It came. Get up. That's it. 2 words, but they shook something ancient in you, something primal. It wasn't a voice from outside. It was from within, from the part of you that had never surrendered, even when everything else did. It was the part of you buried under years of self-doubt, betrayal, loss, the part they tried to kill. And you heard it, clear, steady, resilient. Get up. You were on the floor, weren't you? Maybe not physically, but emotionally, mentally. You were down, laid out. The weight of life had broken your knees. The world had pressed its boot against your back. And for a long time, you didn't resist. You accepted the pain as permanent. You believed the lie that some people just don't rise. But then something shifted, a spark. It wasn't hope, not yet. Hope is for people with options. What you felt was defiance. A slow, rising pulse, a resistance to staying broken. You didn't know how, and you didn't know why, but you suddenly knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, not for you. You remember the moment. Everyone has one. That day, that second, that breath where everything tipped. Maybe it was the look in someone's eyes, someone who pitied you. Maybe it was a message left unread, a door that never opened. Or maybe it was silence, deafening, suffocating silence that made you say, "No, not like this, not now, not ever." You got tired of crawling, tired of waiting, tired of pretending. And in that exhaustion, you found fire. That moment didn't come dressed as a victory. It was wrapped in pain, but inside it was power. The moment you rose, not strong, not perfect, but decided. The day you chose to stop apologizing for surviving. The day you said, "I've been burned, but I'm still burning." That's when everything changed. It was slow at first. You didn't leap up like a hero in a movie. You dragged yourself forward, inch by inch. But every inch was sacred. Every movement was a rebellion. Because every time you moved, you were telling the world, "I'm not done yet." You started doing things they never expected. You cut off the voices that doubted you. You stared into the mirror, not to fix what was broken, but to meet what was rising. You spoke softer to yourself, but firmer to the world. You began walking differently, not because your path changed, but because you had. And the world noticed. They didn't say it out loud, but they felt the shift, that quiet storm in your eyes. That stillness that only comes from people who've died and come back stronger. They couldn't mock you like before. They couldn't belittle what they didn't understand, because now, you were unshakable. They thought your comeback would be loud, but it started with silence, with stillness, with a single whisper that turned into a war cry. That whisper, "Get up," became a rhythm, a drumbeat, a mantra, and soon you weren't just moving. You were building, forging, becoming. That ember they tried to extinguish, it caught fire. You didn't rise in light, you rose in flame. This wasn't recovery, this was rebirth. From that moment on, everything changed. You no longer chased validation. You owned your existence. You didn't ask for a seat at the table. You built your own. You didn't wait for permission. You moved like destiny itself. Because you remembered who you were, no one had to believe in you. You believed in yourself. And when that happens, when a soul remembers its own fire, the world shifts. Not because it wants to, but because it has to. You didn't rise to prove them wrong. You rose to prove yourself right. That whisper inside you, that wasn't just survival. That was prophecy. It was the first flame, the ignition, the crack in the dam that would soon unleash something unstoppable. And now they're starting to feel it. That heat, that pressure, that storm. Because the moment you decided to rise, you became something they could no longer laugh at. You became inevitable. The world went quiet when you chose the path of transformation. No parades, no congratulations, just the cold, brutal silence of self-reinvention. While they partied, you disappeared. While they posted, you practiced. While they lived in the spotlight, you entered the shadows, not to hide, but to build. Not to escape the world, but to become something the world couldn't break. This was your cold forge, a place without comfort, without applause, a place where every illusion burned away, and only the truth remained. You trained in that silence, learned in that silence, bled in that silence. And no one came, no one checked on you, no one saw what it cost. But you didn't need them, because this wasn't about them anymore.